Hi, my friends. Welcome back to Healing Together, a YouTube channel dedicated to telling the God stories that go on around us every day. Today's God story is another one of my stories, and I want to share with you the value of a friendship. This is very near and dear to my heart, and of the 6 months that I was in the burn unit, this story that I'm going to share with you today is by far the one that I love the most. It is a very uplifting, happy time of the 6 months that I was in the burn unit. I was looking back at the videos as I got ready to share this one, and I realized there's a lot of the stories that I haven't shared yet, so I probably will take some time during the winter. This winter, it happens to be snowing outside today, and it's cold and icy. And so, of these days that I'm not out too much, I think I'll go back and I'll share with you some of the stories. And I know I have shared some of them. There's Ray and the turtles, and there's the different stories of the watermelons and the miraculous healing of the bleeding. But today's story is, I've entitled it, and I have used it in messages many times. The title of this one is The Value of Friends. In Ecclesiastes, and I want to read this to you, it says in chapter 4, verse 9 and following, it says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." I want to share with you the power of friendship. Now, every time I preach that message, I get to a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And I always equate that to being you, your friend, and God. And there is a massive truth in that. But it's also the power of many friends. And I love it's not so much that I love the idea, but I appreciate the fact that God made us to live in community with many friends. And I am so blessed with the friends that I have, that I have friends all over this country. I have friends not necessarily around the world, but I have friends in other countries that I have met and made friends with. Some of them are very close. Some of them I'm with 2 or 3 times a week. Others I'm not with a lot, but we are close friends. I have a very close friend out in Oregon that I miss him and his wife, Dwayne and Sandy, tremendously. And I have friends that are right here that I don't get to get together with enough. I have my cousin Jeff. If you've read Pebbles from the Path, my second book, you've read about Jeff and I and how close we are. I saw him coming out of the grocery store the other day, and our friendship is almost palatable. Big word for me, but almost palatable. That how close we are in our friendship. And I have friends Dan and Will and Kevin, and just all sorts of friends that I've had on our YouTube channel that just are unreplaceable. And so I want to tell you about some of the friends that made a tremendous difference in my life. And if you've ever seen me or listened to one of my messages that I give, I always talk about I am not the hero of the story of my burns. Of course, God is God, and He's the one that brought me through it. But humanly speaking, the heroes are those people that prayed for me endlessly, that some of them learned to pray as they prayed for me, and learned to see how God worked as they prayed and as we went through the burn unit. Those are the stories that I want to tell about. I want to tell about some of the people that made a tremendous difference in my life and in my survival throughout that time that I was in the burn unit. I told you last time, on Thanksgiving, just 2 days before this story takes place, how I was very weak and I was resisting even the idea of therapy. And I was 6 foot 1 inches tall, and I was just a little bit over 100 pounds. There was just no will to live. In fact, if you've listened to Cody or to Kevin and Jody's stories, you've heard the term on several of the children that they adopted, failure to thrive. Kids that, while they didn't know it, they had to have a desire to live. And I did not have that desire to live. It's not that I was wanting to die. I was not suicidal at that point. I just didn't care to live. I didn't even think about it. There was never any thought of living or dying. There was just going along with the flow. And so Thanksgiving was such a big disappointment for us. And maybe we might even call it a disaster. But then there was this Saturday. And if I remember correctly, it seems like I remember Ted and Tim Mitchell walking into my room in the Mott Hospital and really surprising the daylights out of us. We were not expecting them to come up. And then Debbie stepped out from behind them. And let me stop here and get a little bit personal, because Ted and Tim were a massive encouragement that they would have come and seen me. And I don't want to take anything away from them, but when I saw Debbie, that it literally, and I know you guys are going to think I'm crazy, and Debbie's going to probably chastise me. It was like an angel walked into the room. First of all, she was somebody that I was attracted to, and I've loved her and for a long time. And Debbie and I now are celebrating 48 years in just 2 months. But it was also the fact that Debbie, it was the first time that I had seen Debbie in almost 6 months that she was not covered up with the protective garb of the burn unit. You see, she had been up to see me once or twice before while I was in the burn unit, but she always had to have a mask on, and she always had to have the coverings of to keep the germs limited as much as they could, and something over my head, or something over her head. Yeah, something over my head too, if you heard that story. But to see Debbie in just street clothes and to see Ted and Tim walk in, I can't tell you how refreshing it was that all of a sudden they were in my room. But there was more to come. And it's emotional for me as I think of the fact that after the initial shock wore off, and we got to shake hands, and the feeling of touching somebody's hand and holding hands with Debbie, they said to me, can you come down to the cafeteria? And I said, yeah, probably. And if I remember rightly, I was laying in my bed or kind of sitting up in my bed. And again, I fought like crazy even getting in a wheelchair. I didn't like to sit up. It was not comfortable. My equilibrium was off, and I didn't spend enough time up to be comfortable while I was up. But they said, can you come down? We got a few more people with us that they wouldn't let us all come up. Can you come down to the cafeteria and we can visit for a little bit? I said, well, yeah, I can do that. So we got in a wheelchair and they wheeled me down to the cafeteria there in the Mott Hospital. And there was almost 35 or 40 of my friends that had come to visit me in the hospital. As I think back on that, there were young people there. Now I say kids, they're kids because we were teenagers, and we were just kids, and they had all come to see me. And with Debbie sitting beside me and Ted and Tim probably on both sides, I don't know, and they took turns and people came up and they would ask me about my scars, they would ask me how I was doing, and we would laugh and we would carry on and we could be loud and we could have whatever, we could do whatever we wanted to, and we could have a good time and have a good fellowship there in the cafeteria of the Mott Hospital, and we could just visit. They asked me how I was doing. I would ask how they were doing. And it was just great. Some of them I met for the first time. That was the first time. Some of them it was the only time that I had met them. And it was just very encouraging to be there and to be a part of it. In fact, I think the only discouragement that I ever had there was that I found out that my friends, I believe both Ted and Tim at that point, had sold their motorcycles because of how bad I had been injured, and I did not have a motorcycle to go home to. When they got ready to leave, I want to tell the rest of this story. We visited and we chatted there for almost 4 hours. I was up. Now, up until that point, I had never even sat in a wheelchair longer than an hour. I had not been up and I had not stayed up. I had not moved around. If I remember rightly, I had done just a little bit of walking, and I had not done any of that, especially voluntarily. And so it was monumental that these young people came and they visited with me and they encouraged me, and we got to laugh and we got to spend time together. It was one of the most moving times and one of the most monumentally growing times for me that there was in the whole hospital. They got ready to leave, and you'll want to hear this part of the story too. They got ready to leave, and they were kind enough to let Debbie take me, along with Mom and Dad, take me back to my room where I was staying. We went up the elevator from the cafeteria. We got off the elevator and we went down the hallway. And as we went around the corner, if I remember rightly, Dad was pushing the wheelchair and Debbie went in front and pulled the door open. As Debbie went up there and pulled the door open, if you remember rightly, one of the fads back then was these big floppy hats. And a man came out of my room and he had one of those big hats on. Now I wear a cowboy hat, but it was a little bit wider brim. And he dipped his head down and he excused himself and he walked out the door past Debbie, stepped around me, and went on down the hallway. And I looked back after him, and I looked to see where he had went, and he just walked down the hallway, and I said, I must have a roommate now, because I'd had a 2-bed room, but there was only me in the room. And I said, I must have got a roommate. Well, we walked into the room, and you kind of had to walk around the corner into the room, and they wheeled me in, but they walked in, and we looked on the bed, and here was my little television, all wrapped up, my 8-track tape player, all wrapped up and put together, my radio clock all wound up, the cords were all wound up, all sitting on the bed and ready to be packed out. He was getting ready to carry my stuff away. I did not have a roommate. What I had was a thief in my room. Dad gave chase, but fortunately enough, according to the police, he did not catch the man. And Dad came back into the room and got a nurse, and we were talking about calling the police, the security force, and making a report, when we heard some screaming and some crying down the hallway. And as they went back, and Dad went down to investigate too with the nurses, they had found out that what the guy had done is, Dad had walked past a stairwell that went down, and this guy had went into the stairwell and stayed there. And when he didn't see Dad and didn't see anybody else moving around, he came out, walked across the hallway, pulled a girl's plug out of the wall for her television, took her television and carried it off, and actually stole her television. As the police came and took the report, they said, yeah, it's becoming quite regular that people are stealing this stuff from people that are not able to move. They're not able to keep their stuff. They're not able to fight back. And so they just find an empty room or a room where somebody's incapacitated, and they steal the stuff out of the room, sell the stuff, and then peddle drugs throughout the hospital. Crazy ending to a wild day, but that day made all the difference in the world. And when I come back with the next video pertaining to the burn unit, I want to share with you the next day and how much of a difference that this visit by my friends and Debbie's friends and friends I had not met yet, what a difference they made. So I want to say thank you to Ted and Tim, especially Debbie, my wife now, to the other people that came. I'm sorry I cannot remember who all was there. I'm sure Milo was there, and Doreen Wright, and many other people that were there. I believe there were some by the last name of Clarks that came up. 35 or 40 people. When I was burned, I think our youth group was probably running 18 to 20, 22 people, and almost 35 people. Almost without exception, they were all teenagers. I don't remember them having any other drivers that came up. And so it just was a fantastic time. And if you are on here and you are part of that group and you remember that day, I want to say thank you to you, because you did make a massive difference in my life. And so don't forsake those opportunities to go and to visit people when God leads you to. Thank you, my friend, for stopping by. Thank you for coming by Healing Together. Please hit that subscribe, like, and notifications bell. We would greatly appreciate it. God bless you throughout your day. Come back again when we talk about the next day after this visit. God bless.